I got fired for being too old, at 35. That sentence didn't just echo in my head, it rewrote everything I thought I knew about my life. But before that moment, I really believed I was untouchable. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 35, about 6 feet tall, lean build. Not the gym-obsessed type, but the kind of shape you get from years of running on stress and caffeine. Short, dark hair, always slightly messy no matter how much I tried to fix it before meetings. People used to say I had a calm presence, the kind that made clients trust me within minutes. I wasn't flashy. I didn't talk the loudest in the room, but I closed deals, big ones. 7 years at the company, from a junior account manager to handling our most valuable clients, multi-million-dollar contracts that basically kept the lights on. And I knew it. Not in an arrogant way, just in a quiet, confident certainty. That's why I never saw it coming. The first sign should have been the hiring wave. It started slowly, 1 or 2 fresh graduates. Then suddenly the office felt like a college campus. Bright sneakers, loud laughter, TikTok conversations during lunch breaks. And then came Jake. Jake Miller, mid-20s, tall but a little too skinny, always dressed like he just walked out of a startup ad. Perfect hair, perfect smile, and that kind of energy that screams, "I know I'm going places." He was charming, I'll give him that. But he didn't understand the work. Still, management loved him, especially Richard. Richard Lawson, my boss. Early 50s, always in tailored suits, sharp jawline. The kind of man who built his career on confidence and control. He wasn't a bad leader before, but lately something had changed. He started chasing trends instead of results. "Energy matters, Daniel," he told me once, leaning back in his chair. "We need people who match the new culture." New culture. That phrase started popping up everywhere. HR meetings, emails, even casual hallway conversations. And leading that charge was Melissa. Melissa Grant, head of HR, early 40s, always polished, always smiling, but the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. She spoke softly, but every word felt calculated. "We're evolving," she said during one company-wide meeting. "Refreshing our identity, bringing in fresh perspectives." Fresh. That word again. At first I ignored it, because while they were talking about culture, I was still the one handling our biggest clients. People like Mr. Thompson, late 60s, old-school businessman, valued trust over trends. He didn't care about vibe, he cared about results, and he trusted me. "Daniel," he told me on a call one afternoon, his deep voice steady, "you're the only reason we're still with your company." That should have reassured me. Instead, it planted a strange feeling in my chest, because around the same time I noticed something else. I was being left out. Meetings I used to lead, Jake was suddenly attending them. Emails that used to include me, now I was CC'd, or not included at all. At first I thought it was a mistake. Then it happened again, and again. One afternoon I walked past a conference room, and through the glass I saw Jake presenting to one of my clients. Richard was sitting at the head of the table, nodding, and for a brief second, Jake glanced at me. He smiled, not friendly, not nervous, confident, like he already knew something I didn't. That was the moment a quiet thought crossed my mind. Something is changing, and I'm not part of it anymore. But even then, I still believed I was safe. I told myself it was nothing. That morning I walked into the office like I always did. Same coffee, same routine, same quiet confidence that had carried me through 7 years in this place. But the moment I opened my laptop and checked my calendar, something felt off. It wasn't empty, it was worse. The meetings were still there, but not my meetings. No high-level client calls, no strategy sessions, just internal check-ins, minor updates, and tasks that didn't require someone at my level. For the first time in years, I wasn't needed. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. "Hey, Daniel." I turned to see Ryan Chen standing behind me. Early 30s, slightly shorter than me, thin build, always dressed neatly but never stylish. Ryan had this nervous energy about him, shoulders slightly hunched, voice always a bit too careful. He was competent but not ambitious. The kind of guy who survived in a company by staying invisible and avoiding conflict at all costs. Melissa asked if you could take over some CRM cleanup, he said, holding his tablet like a shield. Just temporary. I frowned. CRM cleanup? That's data entry. He gave an awkward smile. Yeah, things are just shifting around a bit. Shifting. That word again. I didn't argue. I just nodded slowly, even though something inside me tightened. Ryan left quickly, like he didn't want to be there any longer than necessary. By late morning, I tried to focus on the tasks they gave me, but it felt like busy work, like someone was deliberately keeping me occupied while something else was happening without me. Then the email came in. Subject: Client Strategy Meeting, Thompson Group. My eyes locked onto the screen. I opened it immediately. Attendees: Richard Lawson, Jake Miller, Melissa Grant. Not me. For a moment I just stared at the list, waiting for my name to appear, like maybe I had missed it. I hadn't. My jaw tightened. Without thinking, I stood up and walked toward the conference room. The glass walls made everything visible. Inside, Jake was presenting, confident, relaxed, like he belonged there. He clicked through slides, speaking fast, smiling like he was already celebrating something. But I could tell, he didn't fully understand the client. He was talking about numbers, features, not the relationship, not the trust that had taken years to build. At the head of the table, Richard watched him with approval, and across from them sat Mr. Thompson. Late 60s, broad-shouldered despite his age, silver hair neatly combed back, eyes sharp and unreadable. He was old school, didn't care about trends or energy or culture. He valued consistency, loyalty, results. That's why we worked so well together. I didn't walk in. I just stood there for a second, watching someone else take my place. Then I turned and walked back to my desk. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked up. Daniel? I recognized the voice instantly. Yes, sir. There was a pause on the other end. Why are you not in the meeting? I looked toward the conference room again, then back at my screen. Just some internal changes, I said carefully. Another pause. Longer this time. I don't like surprises, Mr. Thompson said, his voice calm but firm. You've always handled our account. Now suddenly there's someone else and no explanation? I swallowed. I'll follow up with you after the meeting, I said, personally. You should, he replied before hanging up. I lowered the phone slowly. That call should have reassured me. It proved I still mattered, to the clients at least. But instead, it confirmed something else. I wasn't just being moved, I was being replaced. That afternoon, another task landed in my inbox. Update internal training materials. I almost laughed. 7 years in this company, and now I was updating documents no one even read. Across the office, I saw Jake walking out of the conference room with Richard. They were laughing, relaxed, like everything was going exactly as planned. Jake glanced over at me and smiled. Not friendly, confident, like he already knew how this story was going to end. For the first time, I didn't feel confused anymore. I felt something colder, clearer. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a transition. And I was being quietly erased from it. I knew it was coming. Not the exact moment, not the exact words, but after everything that had happened over the past few days, I could feel it building. Still, nothing prepares you for the moment it actually happens. The meeting invite came in late afternoon. Subject: Performance alignment discussion. That alone was enough to set off alarms. It wasn't a normal review. It wasn't scheduled. And it included people who had no reason to be there. Richard, Melissa, and surprisingly, Jake. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before accepting it. The meeting room felt colder than usual. Richard was already seated at the head of the table, posture straight, fingers interlocked like he was about to deliver a verdict. Melissa sat to his right, calm as always, a folder neatly placed in front of her. And Jake sat slightly to the side, watching. Jake looked different up close today. Same clean-cut appearance, same confident posture, but there was something else in his eyes. Anticipation. Like he knew this moment mattered. I took a seat across from them. No one smiled. No small talk. Richard leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "Daniel," he began, his voice steady, almost rehearsed. "We've been reviewing the direction of the company, and where each team member fits into that future." There it was again. Direction, future, fit. Words that sounded neutral, but carried weight. "I've dedicated 7 years to this company," I said calmly. "I assume this is about the recent changes?" Melissa gave a polite nod but didn't speak. Richard continued. "You've done solid work. No one is questioning that." Past tense. My jaw tightened slightly. "But the company is evolving," he went on. "We're moving toward a faster, more dynamic, more adaptive culture." I didn't respond. I just waited. And then he said it. Clear, direct, no hesitation. "You're too old for this team." For a second, everything went quiet. Not because the room was silent, but because my mind refused to process what I had just heard. 35. That was the number they were using to define my limit. I slowly looked around the room. Melissa lowered her eyes, pretending to review something in her folder. Jake didn't say a word, but I caught it. That slight curve at the corner of his mouth. A smile he tried to hide. Not shocked, not uncomfortable. Satisfied. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a decision. It was a replacement. "I see," I said quietly, my voice more controlled than I expected. "So this has already been decided?" Richard didn't hesitate. "Yes." No discussion, no warning, just over. Melissa finally spoke, her tone soft, almost sympathetic. "Daniel, we truly appreciate your contributions. This is simply about alignment with long-term strategy." Alignment. Another word that meant nothing and everything. She slid the folder across the table toward me. I didn't open it. I already knew what was inside. Termination agreement, severance details, legal language designed to make everything feel clean, professional, final. "No one else has anything to say?" I asked, glancing around the room one last time. No one answered. Not Richard, not Melissa, not Jake. That silence said more than any words could. I nodded slowly. "Understood." I stood up. No anger, no outburst, just clarity. As I walked toward the door, I felt every step heavier than it should have been. 7 years reduced to a single sentence. "You're too old." I reached for the handle, then paused for just a second. Not to argue, not to defend myself, but to remember this moment. Because something told me this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else. Something they clearly didn't see coming. Then I opened the door and walked out. The silence hit me harder than the words ever could. The day after I got fired, I woke up at 7 a.m. out of habit. For a few seconds, everything felt normal, like I had a meeting to prepare for, emails waiting, clients expecting updates. Then it came back. All of it. The meeting, the words, "You're too old." And just like that, there was nothing. No emails, no calls, no urgency. Just silence. My apartment felt different that morning, smaller, quieter, like it was reflecting exactly how I felt inside. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself coffee, and just stood there staring at the wall. No plan, no direction. For the first time in years, I didn't know what came next. I spent the next few days doing nothing productive. Scrolling through job listings I didn't apply to, opening my laptop, then closing it 10 minutes later. Every description sounded the same. Fast-paced environment, young, dynamic team. Words that suddenly felt like they weren't meant for me anymore. 35. It didn't sound old, until someone made it sound like a limitation. I started questioning everything. Had I stayed too long in one place? Had I stopped adapting? Was I actually falling behind? That thought stuck with me longer than I wanted to admit. One afternoon my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick it up. "Daniel? It's Eric. Eric Wallace. Late 30s, broad-shouldered, slightly rough appearance with a short beard he never fully shaved. He had the kind of presence that filled a room, not because he was loud, but because he was direct, honest to a fault. We had worked together years ago at a previous company before he left to join a competitor. "Hey," I said, my voice a little flatter than usual. "I heard what happened," he said, no hesitation. "Word travels fast." "Of course it does." "I'm fine," I replied automatically. There was a pause. "Yeah," Eric said. "You don't sound fine." I didn't respond. He sighed lightly. "Look, I'm not calling to pity you. I'm calling because someone like you doesn't stay unemployed for long. The question is, do you want to?" That got my attention. "I might have something," he continued. "Not a step down, not a reset, a real position. But I need to know if you're still you, still me." I looked down at my hand, gripping the phone tighter than I realized. "I'll think about it," I said. "Don't take too long," Eric replied. "Opportunities don't wait." After the call ended, I sat there for a while. That was the first time since I got fired that something felt possible again. But doubt didn't disappear that easily. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message. "Mr. Thompson." I opened it immediately. "Daniel, I hope you're doing well. I don't know what's happening over there, but things feel different. If you're no longer with the company, I'd like to stay in touch." I read the message twice, then a third time. Another notification came in, then another. Different names, different clients, same tone. Concern, confusion, respect. Whew. That's when it hit me. Maybe I wasn't the problem. Maybe the only thing that changed was where I stood. For days I had been looking at myself like I had lost something. But in that moment, I realized something else. I hadn't lost value. They had lost me. I didn't take long to decide. 2 days after Eric's call, I found myself standing in front of a glass building across town. Sleeker, quieter, more deliberate than my old office ever was. The name on the front didn't need to be loud. In this industry, everyone already knew who they were. This wasn't just another company. This was the competitor. I adjusted my jacket slightly before walking in, not out of nerves, but out of habit. The kind you build after years of stepping into rooms where everything depends on how you carry yourself. Eric was waiting for me in the lobby. Same solid frame, same direct gaze. He gave a small nod instead of a handshake. "You look better than you sounded," he said. "I feel better than I did," I replied. He smirked. "Good, because they don't hire people who hesitate." He led me upstairs without another word. The office felt different immediately. Less noise, less pretending. People moved with purpose, not energy for the sake of being seen, but focus. Screens filled with real numbers, real conversations. No forced laughter, no fake culture slogans on the walls. This place didn't care how young you looked. It cared what you delivered. We stopped in front of a corner office. "That's her," Eric said. Inside sat Victoria Hayes. Early 40s, tall, sharp features, dark hair pulled back in a clean, no-nonsense style. She didn't look up immediately when we walked in, finishing something on her screen before closing the laptop with calm precision. Everything about her felt controlled, intentional. "Daniel," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "I've heard a lot about you." Her voice wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was measured. "I hope it was accurate," I replied. A faint smile crossed her face. "More than you think." She gestured for me to sit. "I don't hire based on resumes," she continued. "I hire based on impact. And from what I've seen, you were the impact." No mention of my age, no mention of culture, just results. "We don't need you to start over," she said. "We need you to take over where others fail." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a recovery. This was an upgrade. Within the same day, everything moved fast. Offer letter, role definition, authority. Not a junior position, not even mid-level. Senior strategic accounts lead. Direct access to major clients. Full control over relationships. No unnecessary layers. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't being managed. I was being trusted. By the time I left the building that afternoon, I already had my first set of accounts lined up. Names I recognized. Some of them very familiar. That night, as I sat in my apartment reviewing the onboarding documents, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message. Jake, of course. "Heard you landed somewhere new." I stared at the screen for a second before another message came in. Good luck starting over." I let out a quiet breath. A few days ago, that message might have gotten to me, made me question things again. But now? I looked around my apartment, the same space that had felt suffocating just days earlier. It didn't feel small anymore, it felt temporary. I typed a response, then stopped, deleted it, and locked my phone. Some things don't need replies, they need results. Because the truth was, I wasn't starting over. I was starting from a higher level. And this time, I wasn't going to be overlooked again. The shift didn't happen overnight. It started quietly. A call here, a message there. Familiar names appearing on my screen, not as obligations this time, but as choices. People reaching out not because they had to, but because they wanted to. My first week at the new company, I didn't chase clients, they came to me. The first major call was with Mr. Thompson. Same steady voice, same measured tone. But this time there was something different, certainty. "Daniel," he said, "I've reviewed the last proposal your old company sent." I leaned back slightly in my chair. "And?" "It's not what we agreed on." That didn't surprise me. Jake didn't understand him, not really. "I assumed as much," I said calmly. Another pause, then the words that changed everything. "I'd rather continue working with you." Simple, direct, decisive. Within days, the deal was back on the table, this time under my new company. Negotiations moved fast, cleaner, more focused. Because this wasn't about convincing him, it was about continuing what already worked. When the contract was signed, the number sat there on the screen, 7 figures. A deal that used to belong to my old company. Now, it belonged to me. That was the first domino. Then came the second, then the third. By the end of the second week, 3 more clients had followed. Different industries, different personalities, but the same reason. Trust. Not branding, not culture. Trust. Inside the office, people started noticing. Emily Carter, not related to me despite the last name, was one of the senior analysts assigned to support my accounts. Late 20s, tall and slim, always dressed in neutral tones, hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She had a sharp mind and a quiet intensity, the kind of person who didn't speak much but caught everything. I later learned she had transferred from another department after exposing a reporting error that cost her former manager his position. Since then, she trusted data more than people. "You move fast," she said one afternoon, glancing at the numbers on her screen. "I move precisely," I replied. She nodded slightly. "That explains why they follow you." Meanwhile, things weren't going well on the other side. I didn't need insider information. The industry talks. One evening, Eric dropped a file on my desk. "Thought you'd find this interesting." Inside were summaries, public data, client movement trends, internal rumors. My old company wasn't just losing clients, they were losing control. Delayed responses, misaligned proposals, complaints about communication. And one name kept appearing in the notes: Jake Miller. Assigned to accounts he couldn't handle, pushing strategies he didn't fully understand, trying to replicate relationships that took years to build, in weeks. It didn't work. Clients noticed. They always do. One message stood out. A forwarded email from a client I used to manage. "We prefer working with someone who understands our business, not just sells to it." No name mentioned, but I knew exactly who they were talking about. I closed the file and leaned back in my chair. A few weeks ago, I was the one being replaced. Now, everything was shifting. Not because I forced it, but because the foundation had always been there. They just didn't realize what they were removing, until it was gone. By the 3rd month, it wasn't a rumor anymore, it was a pattern. Every week another client shifted, another contract disappeared from my old company's portfolio. And while my calendar kept filling up, theirs was falling apart. I didn't need to check, but I did anyway. Old habits. One night, Eric sent me a short message. "You might want to see this." Attached was a report, internal data that had somehow made its way outside. Nothing illegal, just enough pieces put together to tell the full story. Revenue down 28% in 6 weeks. 3 major accounts gone. 2 more at risk. I stared at the numbers for a moment. Not surprised, just confirmed. They built everything around short-term optics, Eric said later over a call, and forgot what actually holds a company together. I didn't respond, because I knew exactly what that thing was. Trust. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back quickly. Inside the company, things were worse than the numbers showed. I heard it from Laura Bennett. She used to work in operations at my old company before quietly leaving 2 weeks after I was fired. Early 30s, medium height, sharp eyes behind thin rectangular glasses, always dressed in practical business wear. Laura was the kind of person who didn't speak much, but when she did, it was precise. She had built her reputation fixing problems others ignored, until one too many of those problems got pushed onto her. We met for coffee one afternoon. "You left at the right time," she said, stirring her drink slowly. "That bad?" I asked. She let out a quiet breath. "Worse." She explained how departments had started clashing, sales blaming operations, operations blaming leadership. No clear direction, no accountability. "Everyone's trying to protect themselves," she said. "No one's actually fixing anything." I leaned back slightly. That sounded familiar. "And Jake?" I asked. She paused, then gave a small, almost sympathetic smile. "He tried," she said, "but he was never ready." Apparently, Jake had been handed multiple high-value accounts after I left. Too many, too fast, without the foundation to support them. Clients pushed back. He pushed harder. It didn't work. "Last I heard," Laura continued, "they pulled him off 2 accounts after a major complaint." I didn't feel satisfaction, just inevitability. You can't replace experience with confidence alone. Eventually, reality catches up. "And Richard?" I asked. This time, Laura didn't smile. "He's under pressure," she said. "Board meetings almost every week. They want answers. He doesn't have them." That, I could picture clearly. Richard sitting at the head of the table like always. But this time, not in control. Explaining numbers that didn't make sense. Defending decisions that couldn't be justified anymore. "What's the mood there now?" I asked. Laura looked at me for a moment before answering. "People are leaving," she said. "Not all at once, but enough to feel it. Good employees. The ones who saw what was happening and chose not to go down with it." I nodded slowly. A few months ago, I was the one walking out of that building holding a termination letter. Now, others were walking out by choice. I finished my coffee in silence, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because everything that was happening made perfect sense. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. The call came on a quiet afternoon. No warning, no build-up. Just a name on my screen I hadn't seen in months. Richard Lawson. For a moment, I just stared at it. The same man who once sat across from me and decided my career in a single sentence was now calling me. I let it ring twice before answering. "Daniel." His voice was different. Still controlled, but the sharp edge was gone. Replaced by something heavier, slower. "Richard," I replied calmly. There was a brief pause, like he wasn't sure how to begin. "I won't take much of your time," he said. "I'll get straight to the point." I leaned back in my chair, silent. "Our situation has changed." That was one way to put it. "We've lost key accounts," he continued. "Revenue is down. The board is concerned." Concerned. I almost smiled. "And?" I asked. Another pause. Then finally, "We need you back." There it was. No corporate language, no disguise, just the truth. "I see," I said. His voice tightened slightly. "We're prepared to offer you a significantly improved package. Double your previous salary, a senior leadership role, full authority over client strategy." Everything he thought I wanted. Everything he thought would fix this. "I misjudged you," he added, quieter this time. "That was a mistake." That was new. Richard Lawson didn't admit mistakes. Until now. "No one on the current team can replace what you did," he continued. "We've tried." I let the silence stretch, not to make him uncomfortable, but to let the weight of his own words settle. In the background, I could hear faint noise, voices, movement, tension. The kind of atmosphere you only hear when things are falling apart. For a brief second, I remembered that meeting, the way he looked at me, the certainty in his voice. "You're too old for this team." I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them. "I'm not coming back," I said. The line went quiet, completely still. "I didn't say that was the only option," he replied quickly, like he had expected resistance. "We can structure this differently. Consulting, advisory, whatever it takes." Now we were getting closer. I leaned forward slightly. "If I work with you," I said slowly, "it won't be as an employee." Another pause, longer this time. "Then what are you proposing?" he asked. "Control. That's what I was proposing." "I come in as a strategic partner," I said. "Independent, my terms, my pricing. No hesitation, no negotiation in my tone. And one more thing." I let that hang for a second. "I decide which clients are worth saving." Silence. Not shock, not disagreement, just realization. Because he understood exactly what that meant. Some clients would come back, others wouldn't, and he wouldn't get to choose. "You're asking for full control," he said quietly. "I'm offering you a chance to survive," I replied. The line stayed silent for a few seconds, then, "Send me your terms." Not a question, acceptance. I nodded slightly even though he couldn't see it. "I will." I was about to end the call, but then I stopped. There was one thing left to say. Not for negotiation, not for business, for closure. "You didn't fire me because I was too old," I said, my voice calm, steady. I paused, just long enough. "You fired the only person keeping your company